Hello there, everyone. My name is Waba, and what you're about to watch is Mental Health Monday. It's a podcast that I do every single week live on Twitch, link in the description below. We talk with 1 to 2 guests, sometimes 3, on a topic of the month, and purely I'm just asking them about their experience with this topic. Either they have personally gone through this or they have dealt with it in some manner in a personal way. The purpose of these talks is to bring education to others and to bring awareness to these issues, and that mental health is real, mental health matters, it's okay to not be okay, and more to the point, it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to reach out for help. There's a lot that goes into Mental Health Monday. It's very intentional, and we have a bit of a check-in usually before the talks. In addition, I myself am trained as a mental health counselor. I have a master's in mental health counseling. Now, I never, ever will claim that I am anyone's therapist online. I'm a mental health advocate, and I will share resources to the day I die. But as far as help goes, I highly encourage anyone out there to seek your own help. I have resources both on my Twitch page, but also in my Discord under resources, and highly encourage anyone to seek professional help if you are struggling with something that the people on my podcast are talking about with their experiences. In addition, they're raw, uncut, and unscripted. I usually have a few questions to kind of structure it a little bit, but we might go off the rails sometimes, have some casual conversations. Other questions might be asked, delving into details. All things considered, I put a content warning out there at the beginning of my talks usually, right before we jump into them. And it's just to say, hey, show some respect, towards the guests and their stories, first of all, obviously. But more importantly, if a topic comes up that might be potentially triggering, feel free to click off the video, feel free, to click off the stream, during the stream, or mute the tab, whatever, come back when you feel comfortable. I don't wish to trigger anyone, but I want these talks to be as unrestricted as possible so that folks can tell their story in their best words. Your discretion is advised, depending on the nature of the subject. So with that out of the way, I just want to welcome you into this video. Feel free to skip ahead as well. I'll put a timestamp in the description. And with that, enjoy Mental Health Monday and welcome into the Waba fam, your mental health talk place and queer safe space. Take care. Okay, that went really well, and I'm kind of scared, but all right, welcome in. Hello. Hi, Chris. Feel free to unmute, turn your camera on, all that good stuff. That's not supposed to be there. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. You are very low. I'm going to turn you up to 200.
Hello. Yeah, it's volume settings and so many different pieces of software and stuff. It can be a bit of a pain. It's because I'm so softly spoken, those dulcet British tones.
I hear it. I hear those dulcet British tones, and everyone's going to love them, I'm sure. So hi, this is actually our first time talking. Feels bad.
Yeah, it's like the internet, right? Like, yeah. What can you do? Schedule's busy, Firstly, I want to say thanks for having me on the show. Thank
Absolutely.
you for... Oh, hold on. I haven't got my light on. It helps if I look beautiful.
You already look beautiful, sir.
There we go. That's see. Now I look illuminated and much more angelic, It's not just the albinism charms. Sorry, yeah. So thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
the rescheduling as well.
Yeah, no problem.
UK time zone, it's gone midnight over here. I'm on a late one anyway, but
Yeah.
It is what it is, right?
Is what it is, and I do appreciate you being able to accommodate for the time zone and all that. So, hi. We're talking this month on just an introduction for everyone in chat. We're talking this month on loss and grief, but I also put transitions. Some people don't understand that how I mean it all the time, so I just mean like life transition type stuff. Because we all experience different types of loss throughout our life, not necessarily death, but just different transitioning to different parts of our life, and we kind of lose a part, but we also gain other parts of ourselves through those transitions. Is kind of how I mean it. So you approached me, and also Dave, Mindset by Dave, who we love here, Mindset Daddy, about being on our show. So I wanted to ask you, and just to retell kind of like your reintroduce yourself, do all the introduction things.
Yeah, no, I feel like I've done this a few times, so I'm sort of slowly getting it like more honed. But like,
It's all
if you
right.
want to get yourself a cup of tea, now you've got time because it takes a minute or two because it's a long introduction.
Oh, that's fine. But my introduction's pretty long too, so.
But yeah, so hi, my name is Christopher Leech, or you can call me Chris. I go by Chimp195 on the Twitch Spaces. All the online shenanigans. I am a soon-to-be second year next month psychology PhD student / researcher. My area of research is video games and mental health, particularly looking at student mental health. So that's over here in the UK at a university called Edge Hill. We also sort of there's many other things, but like professionally, I'm also the postgraduate researcher representative, which means that I help represent like the cohort, and we're sort of the voice of the people, and take that back to senior management. We also this year started the postgraduate researcher society. So like in universities, colleges, you have like societies and stuff.
Sure.
They didn't have one for like people that weren't undergraduates, so we thought that was a bit funky. So we're like, let's make one ourselves. We all have free time. That's a joke.
No.
Yeah.
When I did my master's, it was just like, no.
Yeah. I'm also the SciPag cyber psychology rep for the BPS. So that means those acronyms are the Psychology Postgraduate Advisory Group. So that's like a group of just psychology postgraduates across all sort of domains of psychology. And the British Psychological Society, they are split by like division and section. So I'm in the cyber psychology field because games, video games, digital, right? You see the link there. That's my sort of like professional CV. I undergraduate degree was in forensic psychology, criminal justice.
Whoa.
Did a master's
That's
in
really
health
cool.
psychology. So yeah, it kind of all builds in, and PhD, video games, mental health. I am collecting data for my first study. So if you're a student currently studying for any degree, check my pinned tweet. I need data. Outside of like work stuff, I operate sort of under the moniker of Chimp195. I run my show called Blind Psyche, which will become funny once I tell you the next bit about myself.
Oh boy.
So that's I do some streaming.
Right.
Like most content creators, right? I pop it off onto the YouTube, and like everyone in
Whenever you can, pretty much, because I'm sure you're mega busy with PhD. Like, oh my god, dude. I couldn't go for it. It was just too much.
But I mean, I was like glutton for punishment, So I was like,
You have to be, don't you? Kind of
well,
have to be.
gotta milk that CV,
Oh my god.
And then like everyone else in 2021, I have a podcast,
Aye.
because like more content, more things, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so that's like the basis of it. I think I'm very busy. I like to have lots of sort of sub quests going on. Is how I like to sort of talk about it. Like
Little side quests.
yeah, just like doing stuff like all that. I'm a person with albinism.
Right.
Hence the dashing white hair. It's not just because it's season time. I'm also like visually impaired, legally blind, severely sight impaired. Any of these sort of terms. So you get there you go. You got the two Lego bits of blind psychology, the blindness, and in my head at the time that was funny. And
I mean, it is kind of funny.
I just went with the brand, and I was like, that's good. Let's go with it. So that's kind of like the CV, like academically, and like I can talk about the research and stuff if you want. But
I'll probably ask.
but the premise of being here was because I think a big part of what I do is obviously sort of disability inclusion, sort of diversity. I'm a big advocate for that, for essentially all marginalized
Absolutely.
communities. I like to meme about it and be like, because I'm essentially like a cisgendered straight guy that looks white.
Sure.
I can get like in underneath the hood and then like change the system from inside.
I feel that.
I forgot to mention my pronouns are he, him. I neglected to mention that. I apologize.
They, them, by the way, for me.
Yeah, no worries. See, I'm learning, trying to do these things, But yeah, so like I'm here mainly because I was like, you were talking about like things that we can talk about, and you sort of mentioned like loss and sort of like life transitions and stuff. So I was like, okay, well, look, part of my sort of personal sort of biography, if you will, was sort of experiencing loss and grief, and it's another thing that I'm very passionate about talking about. Like, not only as like someone who is studying psychology and has sort of been involved in the field as like a mental health person. I can't say I'm a professional yet because I'm still not qualified, but
I mean, I would think with like how many undergrad degrees and a master's, and you're going for psych, I would say you're a little bit qualified.
I mean, there's some XP in the bar, like, but yeah. So like, I'm working on it, and it's a conversation I think as we had, because just generally speaking, we're not good at talking about like death, right?
No,
We're
we
not good
aren't.
at talking about it,
It's
and
one
it's a
of
bit
the
of a
like,
problem.
it's one of the big taboos of society is death and sex, pretty much.
Yeah, and like I don't want to, ruin anyone's mellow on a Monday night, but everyone is gonna die.
Yeah.
Like,
No.
I want to put it comfortingly. Everyone you hate is going to die, eventually. So like, take
True.
some comfort in that. But also, the other side of that coin is everyone else that you do care about will as well. So, but I think accepting that and being able to like develop that conversation around what to do, because one of the things I sort of encountered with like experiencing grief and loss and that effect on my mental health at the time was that there was this great sense of isolation. Like no one knew like how to speak to me or how to deal with me going through those things, and that was a big a big barrier at the time. So that helped, I think, prompt the discussion.
So what you're saying is, when you're in, grief, you feel like you're isolating because no one really doesn't know how to like interact. No one really knows how to like breach that conversation because they feel so awkward about it. Feelings of isolation. I bet no one here has ever had that kind of thing happen to them lately in the past year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one knows what that's like.
No one knows what that's like.
I mean, so well, it is what it is, right? I mean, I'm speaking from over in the UK and stuff, so a country run by idiots. But let's not start on politics. It's been a nice
Every
day.
country is run by idiots, and I will fucking drive you to talk about politics at some point during tonight.
I mean, like so I'm from Liverpool over here in the UK, which is in the north. So like
I can hear it.
we're known for sort of being like left leaning. So like I have opinions on the current government. I'll say this.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
But yeah, so yeah, that was sort of like the overall kind of like theme and idea that sort of
Right.
basically me posting that introduction in various places led to me being here. Was your original question?
My original question was just introduce yourself.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So that's the retelling of the story. That's how we got from there to here.
So that covers everything about who you are, what you're about.
Yeah, a big geeky boy trying to do some psychology science and do it proper.
Love it. Fucking love it, honestly. All right, cool. Let's just dive into it. Like what it has been. So have you also like done research stuff on this as well, or is it just kind of like personal experience?
So I haven't like looked at it professionally, like in terms of
Right.
done any first hand research, but obviously like I've like read, various
Right.
bits about it, and sort of done that like both. Well, I was gonna say recreationally. That's probably not the right word,
Mm.
but like for my own like self benefit more than
Right.
like professional one, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense entirely. I mean, I guess that brings up a question of like, what kind of things helped you through it. But let's just start at the beginning. What is your experience with loss and grief and stuff like that?
So I think you as you grow, there's this kind of like
Mm.
it's almost like that joke of like, will you give children pets so that they can start to
Mm.
understand the life cycle a little bit? Give them a little responsibility,
Right.
not too much. You sort of learn about like things live, they die, that sort of cycle, right?
Mm.
And I think like I don't know, like most people, I'd say the traditional sort of trajectory and experience with grief is, you know, pets and then maybe like a grandparent or
Right.
someone sort of like that. That was sort of very much my experience. But then the big one for me was as like a first year like undergrad, my
Mm.
dad passed away quite suddenly.
My gosh.
Um, and that was like a big like turning point for me. I go from like this fresh face, like happy go lucky, like studenty lad,
Right.
uh, to like my whole world sort of tilting. So I am going to preface this with like a little content warning. My dad did have some substance misuse issues, so I'm going to like mention that.
We're
Um,
not unfamiliar to talking about that either. Just saying.
yeah, I just know like this the kind of thing that like can
Oh,
obviously
I always put
murder you.
content warning out anyway. So
I did catch the little intro of Adler. Quite that was good stuff. Good
thank
stuff.
you.
But yeah, so he was an alcoholic
Mm.
throughout his life, which as far as I'm aware, sort of stemmed from like a little bit of PTSD from things that he'd experienced.
Right.
I'm not going to get into it because I'd just get too angry, but I'm not sure if you're
Okay.
familiar with the Hillsborough disaster. An event where
I
97,
wish I was. I'm not sure.
97 football fans lost their lives at a football match
Oh,
because of.
yes, I am familiar. Yes.
Yeah, so my dad was actually there. He
Oh my
witnessed
god.
that happen,
Yeah.
and I think that was like he just because he was a white guy of a certain age. They didn't talk about their feelings, so he
Mm-hmm.
drank and various other things sort of spiraled into that.
Great.
So I think that was like a big thing for that. He was an alcoholic through like my childhood, and unfortunately, he
Ugh.
was like the worst type in that he was a functioning alcoholic. So
Yeah.
like
Right.
if you just saw him through the day, you wouldn't know, but
But you
between the
see him
hours
at
of like
home.
5 p.m. and like 2 a.m.,
Right.
just on the source, like every day. And that's something he had to deal with. It was an addiction, I think,
Right.
and stem from that sort of thing. But yeah, so because of that, myself and the rest of the family unit, we eventually moved out
Right.
of the family home, and then like a year or so after that, like we just hadn't heard from him for a little bit,
Mm.
and it was like, oh well, like what's up with him? Where is he? Uh, phone calls, you end up going around, and then I remember that moment quite clearly where like a policeman said like, "Oh no, he's up there," and he's passed, sort of thing.
Oh my god.
And like on that moment, life looked very differently, right?
Right.
So again, because of like various things like external to that, like I was his legal next of kin. So like I
Oof.
don't know, like, and I say this like almost like as a joke, but like
Hmm.
there is a hell of a lot of paperwork involved when you die,
Yes, there is.
especially when you don't like have a will.
Yeah. Becomes
Uh,
immensely harder.
so that was a lot of faffing. That was a lot of faffing. I maintain again half tongue in cheek, and I can get into humor being a source of comfort. But I maintain that like I'm really glad it was like first year of uni because like that doesn't
Mm.
count towards your final accreditation, and I was able to just kind of go on like autopilot and just like focus on survival, right?
Right.
So here's where we get, they say like life is stranger than fiction, right?
Yes.
I'm about to blow your mind. Buckle up.
Okay.
I've written like extensively about this type of thing on like a blog and all that. So it's not like this
Mm.
is new information, but it's a little bit sensational.
Right.
So this happened in like the January right? So the year before that,
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother and auntie on that side passed. So we lost like all three of them in the space of 12 months,
Right.
which
Oof.
left like, my,
Huge gap.
my auntie, she had kids. So like that was her estate, but also like my grandmother's estate was not settled by the time both of them passed.
Mm-hmm.
So then that then fell to me and my cousin to deal with. And like, again, like, I don't know if any of y'all have ever sold a house before, but a lot of paperwork, a lot of admin involved.
Yep.
Uh, so as you can imagine, quite a lot to process, quite a lot to deal with.
All right.
The first few months were just like this feeling of being on autopilot. And we're like, okay, well, we've got to go here, and we've got to do this, and we've got to sign this paperwork, we've got to send this off here, and that there,
Mm.
and that sort of shenanigans. And this is whilst like just being in uni, and just sort of getting on with stuff. I mean, you know,
I mean, being in uni, I feel like it provides like a huge distraction in a way that you can just like hyper fixate and focus on your coursework rather than like deal with like any kind of emotions or feelings or like I guess you have to deal with like the physical paperwork, if the lawyers are coming to you, but as far as like, actually processing it.
well, this is the thing. I was on autopilot for like a solid like 12 months.
Yeah,
Like,
autopilot's a weird it's a weird thing. It's a weird sensation. I think people know what you're talking about, but can you like describe it a little bit more? What does that mean for you?
so when I like reflect on like the year, like so much of it is just kind of like a blur. Like I remember just like
Right.
going through the motions. Like, I think it kind of impacted my mental health like in the immediacy in terms of like, okay, I was physically dealing with this,
Right.
but because there was so much like admin involved, that like as you sort of just pointed out, like that became almost a distraction.
Yeah.
And obviously because things took so long, like, it really did become this like, okay, well, I've got to do this, so then I'll do this, and then this essay is due. I remember
So it's just an automated process of okay, sign here, dot these lines, cross these T's, and like it's a complete emotional disconnect from the actual loss of life.
and this is where I think like it becomes difficult, and I mentioned like it being quite isolating because
Mm.
I was on autopilot all the time, and I was still a student. I was still doing studenty things with like a group of people. I'd have a few drinks, and then I'd have a wee bit of an emotional breakdown. Because I was a young man who didn't really have an emotional outlet. Because you can dial that back even a step further and be like, well, this happened. I was the next of kin. I felt like I had to emotionally support my family, and like I remember really clearly, like the night I found out, I rang one of my friends, and I was like, yeah, so this just happened. And my mate went, like, shit the bed. I've got no idea what to say to that. And I was
Right.
like, I know. I just needed to tell someone. And it was just, I legitimately, the phone call was like 20 minutes of just silence, but like that was helpful, you know.
Because it holds
Um,
space. It holds space.
yeah.
And that's what you need
Um,
sometimes.
so I'd had a few instances where I had a little bit too much to drink. It happens, and like get emotional because it was like that gave me like that because drinking like breaks down your cognitive barriers kind of
Right.
thing. That gave me the ability to then like feel all these deeply rooted and intense emotions that I was feeling
Mm.
and sort of let that out. The problem with that is people kind of like freaked out a little bit about that. They were
Mm.
like,
Really?
"Okay, what do we do with this fella? He's kind of crumpled up on the floor." And to be fair, unless like you've been through that or you know what that's like, that's quite a distressing kind of thing to deal with. Granted, so that was so there was like emotion coming out in that way, but as I say, it was just like that, you know, automatic doing stuff. So then that all sort of kind of clears up, right? I get through that. Uh,
You know,
and
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it kind of just disturbs me a bit that, people didn't really know what to do with you when you were sad. And that in of itself is sad to me because, like, like shit. Like, if a friend is, like, going through the ringer or something, like, I mean, I guess I'm talking for myself, but, like, just be there for them, Just be like, hey, I'm here, Yeah, if everyone
I,
else was drunk, I suppose it makes it, like, considerably harder, but, like,
I
still.
mean, I don't want to be like ragging on them, you know what I mean? I'm not like
I'm
longer
not
friends with any of
trying
these
to rag on
people.
them, I guess, but I'm just like, I don't know, it just makes sense to me.
Well, this is. I mean, I remember it like quite vividly.
Yeah.
But it was just. I remember like, yo, I'd be there, and like, granted, again, these, these are kids as well, in like
Hmm.
retrospect. But like, they were just like stood there and they just had like no idea what to do, and like, and you just really need a hug, just like an arm around me, like would have been
Yeah.
sufficient support. And like they just like, it's fight, flight, or freeze, right? And freeze was the one I think these people kind of defaulted to, and that's
Yeah.
fine. I'm not, as I say, not ragging on them,
Sure.
but that was like quite difficult. Um,
But
and
that
then
really
like
cements for you the isolation. Just no one can relate.
yeah, and it's unless you know it, you don't really know. And as I say, that's like
Yeah.
because I remember another really like specific conversation. This is something I was going to get onto anyway, so we can sort of
Hmm.
leapfrog a little bit. But like when you say something like, "Oh yeah, my dad died when I was a teenager," a lot of people go, "Oh," and then it becomes like kind of like that misery Olympics. Like someone like you can perfectly be like upset and like valid that
I
like your
fucking
dog died.
detest that shit. Listen, I advocate against that kind of shit. It is not the fucking what do I call it? The pity Olympics or whatever. The fuck, Like people's traumas are valid.
Yeah,
Everyone's
like
shit is valid. Your mental health journey is valid. Don't ever compare yourself to someone else and be like, "Oh, well they had it worse," or like I had it worse. Like, no. That doesn't help anyone.
well, yeah, my thoughts exactly. Like I had a friend who like their pet died, and they were like legitimately very upset about it. And I understood, you
I
know
was
what I
like,
mean?
"Oh,
But they were
yeah."
like, "Here's me crying over my pet, and your dad's dead, and I'm just here." And I'm like, "That,
I'm like, don't
but
do
that's
that to
fine,
yourself.
man. Like it feel what you want to feel. Like it's
Right.
okay.
Exactly.
Like don't devalue your own feelings. Like
Yes. People do that
uh,
so much, and I'm just like, don't do that. Like, stop. You are valid. Like,
yeah, like if what you're experiencing right now is the worst thing in the world, then like that's still the worst thing in the world for you. It might not be for me,
right.
but that doesn't matter. The comparison is
Doesn't matter.
irrelevant, right?
Exactly. Doesn't matter how
Uh,
I feel. How do you feel?
yeah, exactly. So yeah, like this, like just lamented that feeling, sort of like isolation. It was really, as I said, just a difficult, like a very admin kind of time. And
Yeah.
then what happened next
Right.
is where things get real wild.
Oh
Okay.
boy.
So I'd like moved into like some new student digs and stuff, and I was like, okay, let's get myself some space.
All right.
Let's, begin to sort of explore these feelings a little bit. This is me like reflecting on it in a much more sagely way now. But it was like, okay, let's move out, let's get some space. Then two things kind of happened. The first thing was I actually got hit by what had actually just happened to me in the past year.
Mm.
Because because of the estranged relationship with my dad, like
Right.
we weren't like on the best terms, and then we ended up having like a brief reunion like a couple of months before he passed away. But we kind of built bridges a little bit. We spoke,
Wow.
and like and then like that was gone. And I think the big thing for me at the time was like, well, like, well, shit, maybe we could have had something, like some
Right.
semblance of a
Right.
relationship, like he
What could
had
have been?
realized where he had went wrong, and like he was. It's kind of daft, right? Because I don't know how familiar people are with like alcohol misuse, but like you can't
Mm.
just go cold turkey, right? It's a
Nope.
dependency. Your body gets used to having that level of toxicity, like in your blood
Yep.
and in your body, right?
Now you
And he
become
just kind of
dependent.
yeah, he had just gone like cold turkey, so then was like quite ill because
Mm.
of that. But in his mind, he was like, "Well, I'm getting clean," and it's because he was like us sort of moving out and stuff was like enough to make him realize.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
but we both know with the way substances go, relapse is a part of recovery, and especially when it comes to alcohol, if you're dependent at that point, going cold turkey, it's probably not going to work out too well.
yeah,
But
not for the best.
all the same, the emotions of just like, what could have been, you know. Cuz here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that when we talk to our parents, we automatically kind of like put ourselves back into that like childish mindset of almost like blind hope and blind faith in our parents. Like you want the best for them and you want them to like be this like nice glowing figure in your life, but it's not the case, and you just have to like as an adult you have to face reality. It's like, oh, my parents are human. They're not like these gods that I once saw them, but we can't help our brains just do that automatic thing of just like seeing the parent as like, put them up on a pedestal. So
Yeah, I think like for me, people have always sort of said, "Oh, Chris, you're mature, old head on young shoulders," that type of shit. Um, and I think it was because like there were many sort of instances where like I was kind of the child acting as the parent, roles were
ugh.
reversed, like like that type of thing, and it's
I hate that for you, and literally the whole thing about like, oh well, you're quite mature is literally just, you were traumatized as a child, weren't you?
yeah, pretty much like I had to adapt to the situation. But yeah, so like going back to the narrative, so like and then I began to like actually process this, and that was when like my mental health took a turn. I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of sort of feelings here, and you know, uh, there's kind of like I sort of phrase it as I had like two real like bouts of depression, right? Like two sort of like real like peaks. That analogy doesn't really work because it's a trough for depression, not a peak. But you all know what I meant.
I understand.
And so like it was me like processing this, and like I had a few like episodes again like involving drink, which I kind of thought was ironic at the time and still do. But like it was like,
Alcoholism is genetic to a degree.
well, it's so yeah, that was a thing. And then like I was having these sort of like outbursts and these experiences, and it kind of like peaked with just me being like an absolute mess. And I eventually decided like, okay, like I've hit rock bottom. Like what?
Right.
Where else is there to go? Turns out it wasn't rock bottom. I just kind of like hit like a like a ledge on the way down. But like so again, like the reiterating, like the people around me didn't know how to handle me. They didn't know how to handle these outbursts. They weren't necessarily emotionally equipped at the time to even just like supply like a general like level of like resource. I think, and it was through just like the university, and I will sort of praise it in that like they had student well-being support. So I
That's
emailed and
awesome.
said, look, like this is what I'm going through. I'm a mess. I need to speak to someone. I had 6 weeks of sessions. It was like all straight like CBT, which you know like don't think about how upset you are. Okay, I'm still quite upset though.
I have a rant about that, but Mindset by Dave has helped me understand why it is that in the UK, like it's mainly CBT, but it still frustrates me to no end.
I wanna preface that with I have no problem with like CBT at all. I
Yeah,
just think like CBT is like the default therapy in the UK, and
yeah,
therefore it's not delivered that well. If like they're not going to just offer you prescription, but we'll get onto that.
yeah.
So
I
I went through
agree.
this and like got like picked myself back up a little bit, and
Right.
obviously this kind of period was like okay, pick myself up. And traditionally, like again, like this sort of ideology of grief is that someone passes away, you're hit with this realization of like life is so precious. I must rethink everything and redesign everything, right? And it's not really quite that simple. I think that's 100% like a natural reaction, bit of a knee
Right.
jerk reaction, totally fine. Because this kind of hit me like a bit slower, I was like, okay, look, like there are now physical demands on me that I didn't have before, and I
Exactly.
need to kind of get my shit together, right? Like I was it's stereotypical phrase, but like okay, I'm now like the man of the house, right? You know, not like literally, but it's like okay, look, I'm in my own little digs. I've got to pay my bills.
Right.
I'm
Right.
doing this degree. Like I was a second year at this point. I was like, yo, let's get the business done. So at this point, things get, as I said, I've been teasing, things get wild. In that, um, it emerged, and like a big part of this is like I can't, it's not for me to speak about anyone else and their feelings and thoughts. I can only speak about myself.
Sure.
But basically, I joke that it was like through doing forensic psychology, which is psychology of criminals.
Yes, it
Like
is.
all those popular, not like CSI, which
No,
people always say.
it's not
Um,
CSI Miami or whatever.
no, but like
Uh,
basically, it emerged through confession that like a family friend had actually murdered my dad. And this he said this. He was it was at a reunion, speaking to an undertaker, and was like, "Oh, so just say like I had done X, Y, and Z," and then the person was cremated, there'd be no evidence of that, would there? And the Undertaker was like, well, no, but why would you do that? Like that type of reaction. And like, yeah, so then he was giving like erroneous details to how he had murdered my father, basically. And like, as I was being told this story, like I had kind of already worked out these pieces, because, and it will become apparent momentarily, but like, this was, like a family friend who was a very close friend of my dad's. But like, obviously he passed. There wasn't a will, because there was a estate to settle. There was money involved. He was, like, well, he wanted, use to have this much and this much, and he wanted to give me a slice as well. And at the time that made like complete sense. This friend was like, he was at my father's funeral.
He was trusted.
Yeah. This is someone that, like, as a family, had been known since he was like a teenager, right? Like,
right.
And then this came up, and like the ideas had kind of already twigged together in my brain a little bit. Like it kind of made sense, if that makes sense. I don't want to say like too much. They have since passed themselves, but I don't want to talk ill of the dead, as it were.
Sure.
But like when you put all the pieces together, like it legitimately made sense. Like it really did. And I was like, yeah, okay, I can see that. So then that was like a second wave then, because it was not only like I just about begin to deal with like the fact that I was now fatherless and the effect that was having on me. But like it then became that second tier of like anger that his life was taken from him. Like I mentioned that, like, oh well, we were sort of potentially on the roadmap to having some sort of semblance of a relationship again,
So
like,
was it the friend that possibly murdered him, or?
Well, it was it was like we've worked that out. You know what I mean? But it's like it's that thing of like, because I know like that happened. It took him away from it. It took that opportunity away from me, but also him.
I'm not sure if I'm following.
So like, because so it was one thing like saying like my dad had passed away, and like
Right.
at the time we just thought it was like of natural causes, because of the alcoholism.
Right.
But like to know that he was then essentially murdered for money, like for capital gains.
Was like, how so was he murdered? Do you think, like, the friend reintroduced him to alcohol kind of thing, or?
Oh no, like a bit more graphic than that. So I mentioned he wasn't like well at the time.
Right.
The family friend was also someone who was diabetic, so had access to syringes, and the method he described was injected your dad between the toes, causing an air bubble, which caused a heart attack.
What the fuck?
Which biologically, like, apparently that checks out. Like,
It does. It does check out. That's very fucked.
And like, this is like detailed to perfection, because this happened on like the Saturday, and then like no one heard from him till the Tuesday, so there's no evidence of this because he'd been so ill and was in and out of hospital.
Ugh.
The Undertakers, the coroners weren't bothered. Like they were like, oh yeah, it's right off, easy. Guy was not in great shape. So like, yeah, then it became that kind of anger of like, oh, so like not only did like my chance of like him just passing away being one thing, but also like any potential chance that there was like literally taken from him and me.
Was he ever charged?
No. Well, because this emerged like a year or so after he died, and he was just sort of like, you'll love this. So he'd said all this at a school reunion, right, around other people, which is how this came up, bragging about it, and then when he was questioned, he was like, just a joke, only joking, but like with like actual like details of like times that he went round and exactly what he did and when he left and all that. You don't joke about that by your like supposed
No, you
mate,
don't,
right?
fucking joke about that kind of shit. That's really weird and really awful.
Yeah,
and it's awful that he wasn't ever like prosecuted about it.
I mean, okay, so I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm not a religious man. I'd firmly sort of say myself as like agnostic, right?
Sure.
You know, I don't know what happens next. But he actually passed, the killer passed away a few years later, at the same time of year my dad passed.
Right.
So that's
karma.
coincidence, but yeah, karma, it comes around, right?
Pretty much.
So yeah, that was the thing. So then, like, there was that anger of like, oh wow, like someone did this for money, and like, wow, what an evil scumbag. And that kind of just brought it all back. And I remember like hitting like a really like another bad slump. This was like towards the end of my degree, and I remember like hitting like an even like more severe depression. I think it was because of that, because like, you know, I'd only just begun to deal with it. And spoiler, you know, people watching, but like, grief is never something that just goes away. It's something that you just learn to manage. My favorite analogy is that there is a box with a pain button on one of the walls, and the ball is just repeatedly hitting that button in the first instance, and it hurts a lot. And then slowly the box expands, so the ball will just ping around, and your chance of it hitting the button is much fewer. But then when it does, it's still like that punch in the face. So like the box had begun to like grow a little bit, and then just went shut, and like the button was just on constant at that point. So I think like that, combined with the stress and the pressure of everything, you know, I was going for like a first class degree as well at the time.
Right.
It was just a lot, and I just broke, like just cracked like a nut at Christmas, you know, and just really hit the bottom. And you know, I think I've spoken about it before, but I got to the point where I was just acting like very, like as we would say in like research terms, I was engaging in risk-taking behaviors. You know,
Sure.
I say that just almost to, you know, spare my own blushes, really. But I think, you know, like,
Right.
again, like, not to be like uber triggering anything, but that eventually I hit a point where I tend to take my own life. I was just that in the gutter again, reinforcing the whole like, I didn't know who I could speak to because I'd been to the university services within the past 12 months. I couldn't go there again because mental health support non-existent.
So dumb.
And like, you know, no one understood. Like, I already knew that they didn't understand, and it got to that point where it was like, well, Chris, stop going on about your dead dad. You're bringing the mood down.
Really? You got that from people?
Not like in that type of, you know, dickish way, but like
Direct. It was
essentially,
pretty
like,
indirect.
yeah, like, you know, like, he's talking about that again. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
I didn't hang around with great people at uni. I since learned this. I distanced myself with them quite swiftly after that. Rightly so. But like, yeah, it was not a great time, and this time I like really did hit rock bottom, and I was like, okay, where do we sort of go from here? And a big part of like my process was just talking to people and just like saying like, this is how bad it got, you know, because I just didn't feel like there was a way to turn. I think, you know, we talk about mental health more generally, but it's kind of like those feelings of like being a burden and being so weighted down, you know, and those sorts of things, compounded by the fact that I felt like more than ever like no one understood what I was going through and what I was experiencing.
Absolutely. Like, just like, I mean, it's like layers of burdendom. Like, you're burdened by the loss, but you're also feeling like a burden to others because, you know, they feel like they need to handle you with kid gloves, you know, or just like, you know, kind of like, you know, at a certain point they get fed up with that and they're just like, we'll get off it already, you know.
Yeah, and you know, like, I obviously now know that's just not how you handle that type of thing,
No,
right?
no, it's not. Can I ask a personal question? Feel
Mhm.
free to not answer, but was there also kind of like a generational disconnect? Now, I'm not sure how old you are, but compared to your mates,
No, we were about the same age.
same
We
age,
were all
all
about
right.
the same age at the time, you know, sort of going through uni and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you know, as I say, like, I don't blame them for it. Like, initially, I think like then like the fact that they were just like, you know, began to get a bit rude that's on them. Like, that's a them problem, right? And you know, it's not to tar everyone with the same brush. I did have social support, you know what I mean. But then you get that sort of backwards thinking of, well, you know, I've been relying on this one friend enough. I don't want to continually have to go back to them as like a source of emotional support, when in actual fact, like, really any support would have been good. So yeah, that's like, in a nutshell, like the story of that. And then like what came after was like just an acceptance, and then like talking about it. And I found blogging really cathartic, as an experience.
Blocking.
Just like blogging, so like just writing about stuff.
Oh, blogging. Sorry.
Blogging, yeah, double G. And just like writing about it, and letting that out. Like at the time, I was writing a lot of like song lyrics and stuff, just as a way to express myself. And then that sort of eventually bloomed into blogs, and just being honest. And I sort of tout that as like my first small steps into like mental health advocacy, and just being like, you know, this is what I went through, and for me to write this down is important for me, and if it resonates with you, then fair enough. Because I think that you know, if it sounds almost patronizing, but I think like when you come out of like an episode of ill mental health, right, like you begin to realize just how like daft you were being, thinking that you were like the worst piece of crap ever, and that, like, you know, you intrinsically have value and stuff.
Yes, you do.
So I was like, oh wow, like, you know, this is something that everyone goes through at certain points, and you know, like for me, it hit me at this time.
Right.
You know, like I want to be able to talk about it because that might help other people who have experienced it, and that was like the very sort of burgeoning of mental health advocacy. So I think, like, you know, that was where I was at. I think, you know, again, like my road to recovery, but like, you know, things like music was very important, and like just eventually like dealing with it and focusing on the work again was another good thing. And just be like, okay, you know, it sounds really daft again because, you know, Britain problems, but I had reached this point. I went to see, you know, my doctor, and I was like, okay, hey, like this is going on. What can we do? And they're like, we can put you on a waiting list, or do you
Oh,
want some
Lord.
pills? And I was like, I really don't want the pills. Just personally for me, like, I'm not knocking like antidepressants or anything, but just for
Right.
me, not for me. I'm okay, thank you. Like pills were not gonna help me deal with the death of my father. You know what I mean?
No, they are not.
That's a therapy thing,
Yes, it
in my view.
is.
And they had no therapy. There
Great.
was no therapy out of stock, unfortunately.
Out of stock. Hate that for you, honestly.
Um,
Shite.
so I just did what I had to do. Did what I had to. I think I feel like I'm like, you know, swinging my phallus about, being like, I just managed to sort it out myself with social support. We're talking about it. I think genuinely, like, having like doing a psychology degree was really helpful at the time. Like, I
Right.
honestly legitimately say that, because I learned very rapidly out of necessity my own
Right.
coping mechanisms and
Yeah.
strategies, and like was just like constantly applying them and adapting them and doing what needed to be done,
Yeah.
right? And like, as like, you know, I've had breakdowns since. You know, I
Right.
cry.
And
You
that's
know, I
fine.
think
That's gonna
things like
happen.
you know, the anniversary of his birthday, of his death, things like
Mm-hmm.
Father's Day, you know. And we can kind of talk about the blooming, you know, the thriving element
Right.
later on, but like,
Before we do
look,
that, we run a minute and a half ad every hour,
mm-hmm,
just to get rid of pre-rolls for people who come into the stream.
yep,
So we're gonna do that now,
no
or at
worries.
a moment right here. So just don't say anything too prolific in the next minute and a half. But yeah, see you in a minute and a half, folks. All right, quick. What's the meaning of life? Go.
Endings, because if nothing ended, it'd be really boring, and we wouldn't be able to appreciate the things that we've got. Easy.
Shit.
I can get onto the whole like, you know, reading on philosophy and stuff, and like, I try to like build a brief narrative story in my mind, sort of take it. But like, that's like, you know, we've had where the grief comes from, the loss comes from. Then we can talk about, okay, well, what's that like to physically manage it, you know? And I like, you're the point I'm at now. I always like laugh that it's like I should definitely be like in therapy, like, but I just don't like. I don't know. I'm doing okay. I'm trucking along.
I mean,
Like,
two things just popped out at me right there. One, that's literally a type of therapy. It's called I think it's called Life Rhythms or something like that. But it's basically all about, the stories that we tell ourselves. And what is the story that we're telling ourselves to ourselves constantly, and that kind of like, and it's a bit on the CBT kind of end of things, but it's more like wholesome and mindful and humanistic of just kind of like, if I keep telling myself this story about myself, I'm going to end up believing it. So if I keep telling myself that I'm a horrible person, I'll never have any friends, etc., so forth, then I'm going to end up being a horrible person, not having any friends, But it goes more in depth than that. And then the other thing that you said is that, you therapied yourself in a way. It sounds like it. Or you got yourself through it eventually. And that's something I relate with a lot because I didn't go to therapy for the longest time, but I ended up CBTing myself, amongst other stuff, out of like anxiety and literally daily panic attacks going to Drexel. My environment did a lot to do with it as well, but yeah. Meditation.
Yeah, no, I think
We're back, by the way.
Okay, we're back. But I think on that, it's all about, someone asked me once, okay, how we cope? Like, how do we cope, right? And I was like, I don't know. You just, that it's like that Bob Dylan lyric, like, all I knew how to do is to keep on keeping on, and that's it. Like, I just keep trying to do the thing, and that varies, and there's that it's that meme in it, like my best, and it's all over the point, and that's just the way it is, right? Like, life has a degree of variance in its data, and if we just accept it, we can sort of move on. And it sounds all a bit whimsical, right? But
no, it doesn't. Not to me.
To get us back where we were going, so yeah, we just kind of been through the narrative journey. Like, I experienced this loss, and I obviously, it's ironically, and this is going to sound really strange, but it obviously affected my life more than I think almost any other single event has up to this point, right? The biggest sort of challenge that I've overcome, I think, certainly. But it wasn't actually a death that actually caused me to make the most change. But yeah, I don't want to rush too far ahead. But that happened. I hit rock bottom. I was in a period of very serious depression. I was having anxiety. I experienced my first panic attack during that period. And then slowly somehow managed to drag myself out of it. And I'm not doing that to I'm so great, this is the miracle cure you've all. I'm not a YouTube ad, right?
I don't think you are either.
But that, I just managed it. I don't to this day know how, and I'm very grateful to the people supporting me during that period and made it happen.
Honestly, sometimes that's kind of what it is, though, is that the fact that you even had any support at all compared to nothing and just being isolated, that's gonna help out so much to pull you out of it, say so to speak. Because then you have the space to process it with other people and with yourself, and you're giving yourself that space to process it. Before, you said you were in this blur automated, just all right, got to do the admin shit, kind of mindset. But now you're more in touch with your emotions in this moment. You're more, able to make those connections for yourself and process yourself through it. I think it makes sense in a way of why you were healing when you healed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it did that, and then I think the biggest turning points after that, when I actually had that sort of light bulb moment of I started to meet people that had been through the same thing, and you were like, oh, you get it. There's that that ease of just oh my, you actually understand what I'm talking about. What a relief this is. I can just be honest and I can say XYZ and you'll know what I mean. And that was a big moment, I think, for me. Having someone understand that.
Because now you don't feel so isolated anymore.
Well, exactly. And again, that's, I'm saying oh, all my friends that didn't know what it was like at the time. It was isolating during those periods, but I'm very lucky to have I did have a couple of great people that help keep me on side,
Absolutely.
So yeah, so that, that hit me, that caused a lot of physical change. And we talk about transitions, right? This was a very explicit and literal impact and transition that affected me, and it still does now. As I mentioned, like there are some harder moments in the year than easier ones. Like I mean, even like right now, I'm wearing like a couple of bit of bling, bit of rings. They were my dad's. I sort of like wear them like talismanic, if you will. Like we got a little bit of a stat boost. Any RPG fans in chat,
I'm sure.
that sort of thing. But I think now I'm at the point where okay. So I don't know if you heard of Nick Cave, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds,
No.
and he's an Australian artist, very very popular. He's got some very sort of avant-garde kind of punky stuff in the back catalogue, but he actually experienced the loss of his son a few years back, and like wrote an album about it, and then like wrote a preceding album that came out in 2019, I think it was, maybe very beginning of 2020.
Okay.
And like if I think it's 27. I might be getting my dates slightly wrong, but I think it was 2017. There's an album called Skeleton Tree, and the 2019/2021 was called Ghosteen. And I listened to them both after one of my friends who was like a big Nick Cave fan said, "Give these a listen." And I think if you want to try and understand what grief is, like listen to those albums, because the first one is like it literally sounds like a raw outpouring of like pain and emotion. And it's so artistically and musically done, by the way. Like even if like you don't necessarily like, even if it's not like your jam, like artistically, it's just so good. And then like Ghosteen is just on
What's this guy
another
called
level.
again?
So Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and the first album's called Skeleton Tree, and the second one is called Ghosteen. So Ghosteen. So yeah, and like Ghosteen, like oh my goodness, the first 3 tracks I think like have me in tears nearly like every time. They're like a little like trilogy of songs, and it's like the second album is like that broader articulation of grief. You got like that raw emotion, and that like felt very cyclical to what I had been through. This like very raw, difficult to kind of almost understand bit, and then afterwards like a much broader processing of it. And like my days, like some of the lyrics are just incredible. It's a very emotive album, but I think that like just even like one of the lines, right, like life and its fierce undertow, just like sums up like an awful lot about like what grief feels like. It is a wave that crashes over you sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't move you at all. Sometimes it absolutely knocks you on your ass, and the tide can come in and it can go out, and the next thing you know, you can be underneath the water, just like that. And that's like
It's a good
very
metaphor.
nice. Yeah, it's a really really good. It's one that I use a lot, like the fierce undertow of grief, and that's the way it can happen. Like it can just hit you. I mentioned I was from Liverpool. I'm a big Liverpool fan. My dad was a big Liverpool fan. And Liverpool's like anthem, "You'll Never Walk Alone," like is another emotive. So I cannot listen to it without like tearing up. Like it's so beautiful. I've also heard it at way too many funerals. Just generally, he had it played at his. And it's just so powerful. It's just such a powerful song to know that, like hold your head up high through the storm, and you aren't walking alone, even when like you feel like you are. And I love the fact that I have those type of emotional connections to thing. And as I say, like sometimes I'll be fine, and then like I'll just hit a little moment, or like I'll see something or I'll feel something like that. I just have a wee cry to myself, or like I'll just listen to a couple of sad songs and just let it out. I let that wave pass over
That's
me and just let it
awesome.
go through me
Right.
and just experience it, right? And I
Exactly.
think that is what we would call in the profession healthy emotional processing.
Yes, it is.
Right?
I would say so. I would say so.
You can say it's like in extreme, like a little bit, but like that's just the depth of which that I feel emotion, and I can feel good things to that depth as well. But that's like the part of the journey for me is like was learning how to manage that and sort of wrangle with those emotions.
Right.
And I think the thing I think one of the things I hope people maybe listen to this or me jibber jabbering sort of take away is that like there is no kind of guide to this. You just go through it, and you
Right.
keep taking steps.
Yeah.
I
no,
really
there-
dislike the Kugarossi stages of grief for a long time. Like you go through the 5 stages, and that's that.
Uh,
Because that didn't align with what I was experiencing, right? It was only actually, weirdly enough, reading The Psychology of the Legend of Zelda, edited by the fantastic Dr. Anthony Bean. It has a chapter on Majora's Mask, written by Dr. Emery S. Daniel, about the Kugarossi stages of grief within the game. And it was only through reading that it was like, actually, the whole point is that you go through the stages multiple times.
right.
You might
I
go
was
from
literally about to
one
say that.
right to the other and then back and flip flop and all these sorts of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was only when I read that I was like, that makes more sense.
Yeah. No.
That was much closer to what I experienced.
Loss and grief is not a linear process by any means. You're gonna go through, those stages are like generic emotions that people do go through when it comes to loss, but you don't go through it in order. You don't go through it, and even once you go through all of it and you even get to acceptance, you might go back and go through it again, or skip around or skip a stage, over
I think
again.
pardon me
over again.
being
Yeah,
a little bit getting sort of the cane out and getting a little bit angry old man here.
do it.
But this actually moves me to a couple of things that like really piss me off about it. It's one of those things. I don't know if anyone else will agree with this, but when people that like never knew my dad, never met him, they just like, he'd have been so proud of you, son.
Oh god,
He'd be so proud of you right now. And I'm like, you didn't know him.
you didn't fucking know him.
You might have thought I was an absolute dick. Like, you don't know.
Honestly, I think people are fucking shit when it comes to like how to like talk to someone who's grieving, because they try to say these things about like, oh, like he's looking down at you from heaven or whatever, like, trying to make you feel better, but it's like you didn't know him.
It comes from a comforting place, right? Like, I'm not,
Yeah, it comes from a nice place, but at the same time, like, shut up. like if you actually want to help me hold space, how about that?
Yeah, even if you were just like, if I like say something publicly about it and then someone just goes like, that's a really nice thought, or like, I'm sure he's thinking about you, or something like that, I'd find that much more palatable than like, oh, be so proud of your son. Like, just,
Yeah.
like, I get what you're trying to say, but you're just not saying it like in the right way, like, because I mean, like, I'll be real honest. Like, one thing I do credit like my dad with was like, I felt loved. I felt loved by him. He was actually quite forward thinking for his time, and that he had no problem like expressing affection, like, which feels kind of wild to say given that like he also struggled with some other emotional stuff. But like, so I like know, in the old steel cage, as it were, like, he did love me, you know what I mean, and he was proud of me for various things. But it is that kind of like, you do something momentous. Like, I remember like starting the PhD and like, getting my undergrad and my master's, and like, there was always like that type of reaction of like, like, he is missing this moment, or like, and like just being like, I'm doing this for not just him but all the people, up there, you know what I mean.
What it reminds me of a bit is like kind of like moral grandstanding, of just like, you're just saying something, but there's no actual action being taken. Like, they're trying to say something nice and comfort you, but like, are they actually going to take emotional responsibility in any shape? No.
I caught a quick question in chat, actually.
I caught it too. I was about to ask you it, actually. I was like, this is a good question. I want to ask it.
What words felt the most comforting you amidst your grief? So I'm gonna have to like preface this because if you haven't gathered already, I'm a bit of a rambler. To quote Stephen Fry quoting someone else, what someone would say in 10 words, I would say in 100. And like, that's just me, Soz. Not sorry.
Don't
but
be.
like,
I love it.
Part of just like, my journey, it relates to another loss actually, because my auntie passed away after a battle with cancer. And like, this, weirdly enough, was the death that like hit me the hardest. It really, my auntie was like, she was a great biker woman from the country. Her one of her pieces of advice was, never drive when you go in the pub. Ride your horse, because You can get done for drunk driving, but there's no law that says you can't be drunk and driving a horse. That type of lady, absolute class. That like, yo, in a bite, like she was someone who just lived life to the absolute like max. I know again, like that's almost like a cliche thing, right? But when she passed, I was like, it really sort of was that slap in the face of like, you know what? I really need to make sure I'm getting the most out of things.
Yeah.
And like, yo, if you're not like not like in like a purely selfish kind of, well, I'm gonna do what I want. But I was like, I was not putting like myself first, and I wasn't actually going through enough self care, and that was the death that really hit that nail in for me. And I remember like at that time, I was like, okay, I can make some changes, and like that benefit me. And one of the changes around that was like just trying to understand my place in the universe. I feel like, you know, everyone has like an existential crisis or five during their 20s, right? So I did what anyone with a degree would do because I think book smarts. I read a couple of books on philosophy, and two of the best books that I read were gifted to me by two different people. One was a lend, admittedly, and one was a gift. But one was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I forget the author's name, but if you Google that, you'll find it. And the Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus.
Yes.
So The Subtle Art of it was a good read, but I think the big takeaway from that was if you're always attempting to measure like success by this metric,
right,
you'll never be happy. And it kind of gave the example of the guy that got kicked out of Metallica and like was then in like, I think it's like Megadeth, and like you're this hugely successful band, but he was always upset because it was never as big as Metallica. But like to anyone else you go, but like you're literally a freaking billionaire,
right? Like
the band. So like by his metric, he was not happy. And it's like, it's all about just what you choose to measure, which is, you know, how the sciences work. It's what you choose to measure and how you measure it.
yeah.
But like that was a big one for me. And like, actually, like even like how I was feeling and dealing with my own grief, like don't stick it against anyone else's yardstick. Right.
Absolutely.
It's where you're at on your journey. Yeah. So that was like really comforting. And then the Myth of Sisyphus, I thought was an absolutely fantastic book. For those that don't know, Sisyphus was a guy who pissed off the gods a lot. A little bit of a tricky boy, bit slimy. So the gods thought, okay, because in Greek mythology you always get your comeuppance. The gods were not nice people. No. So his sort of like final punishment was, okay, Sisyphus, mate, say if you can get this boulder out of this hole, over the top of it, you can live immortally for in the world. And he was like, boss kid, I'll do that, easy money. Not knowing that the boulder was charmed, so every time he pushes it up to nearly the lip of the hill, he's about to get it over, comes rolling straight back down. And that the idea is like that's the torture, that's what he has to do for eternity. But Camus' argument was, well, like, what if Sisyphus is happy doing that though? And like when we think of like the broken capitalist society that we live in, and we talk about the daily grind, and we talk about we're just going through the motions, and it was like, actually, like, why not find a bit of solace in that? And that was a really big thing for me, because at the time I was working like 2 jobs, and I was chasing the PhD for like many years, and I faced like numerous rejections over the idea, and I got to a point where I was like, you know what, maybe it's just not for me, maybe I just shouldn't bother. And like reading that was like, okay, actually I can take solace in the grind, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't stop trying to get myself another bigger and better boulder to push up every day. Which is what the PhD is.
Yeah, I see that.
But like again, I'm laughing, I'm making jokes, but like that was like something really comforting in that, like, if you accept the extent of your reality in that, like, maybe you are just pushing up a boulder up the hill every day for it to come back down, and then that's it, you die, was just something for me to go, actually, you know what, like, you can still be okay with that. That can still be like, why does that have to be a bad thing? So in the midst of the grief, the advice, the actual comforting statements were like, it's okay to just be where you are, and to just do what you're having to do to get that boulder up the hill for the day. And like, if you're gonna measure yourself against any yardstick, measure it against your own standards. And that, I always say, I'm very competitive. Like I wanted that first at undergrad, and I got that first. I was like a bloodhound for it. was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it. Same with the PhD. I was like, I want to get this. It took many years to get there, but I was like, I'm going to get it. I've got it. I'm on it. I'm doing the business. I'm doing the thing. And that's just because I'm very determined, and you get a bit of luck, a bit of rub of the green, as they say. But like, it is just that determination of saying, like, well, no, like, it's what I'm passionate about. It's what I believe in. It's what I'm going to work for. And that's what I did, and just being able to say, doesn't matter how big the increments are, as long as like I'm going the direction I want to go in. And in the midst of the grief, it was like, well, actually just getting to a day where I'm okay is a good day. And I think, I can genuinely I can go like days without even thinking about my dad, weeks,
Right.
even, right? And that's not like, I'm not like disrespecting him. That's not like a bad thing. It's just, I'm just busy, right? And I can have days where I think about it all the time. And that's okay as well. Like,
oh man, I wish I knew you earlier in life, because I'm such a humanistic psychology person. I think I've told you, and I said it in the intro, but master's mental health counseling. But like they ask you, what are you gonna focus on? And most of us say mix, and I said mix, but I'm really like, take a person where they're at, just completely like where you're at is completely valid, and whatever you need to do, whatever you are gonna find most helpful in the moment is the most important thing in the room, for me.
I mean, I'm about to like double quote one of my favorite psychologists, Dr. Kelly Dunlap. But like, if change was easy, we wouldn't have therapists. Right?
That's
like
funny.
if it was like that easy, like
Yeah.
we'd be out of it. We'd be out of a job, right? Like, well, we don't need any research on this because change is instantaneous, and you know what I mean?
Just like, I don't like this part about myself. Bing. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
we wouldn't have degrees in the subject, right? I think the dark side, the cloak and dagger to all this is it's part of the problem. I think when you are trying to engage in growth, right, is that there's a level of moral entrepreneurism in like mental health of like I am not a huge fan of like purely mindfulness apps. And when I say purely mindfulness, I mean like I love mindfulness as much as the next person.
Mindfulness is great, but it needs to be combined with other things.
Whereas like you get this kind I'm not going to name names. I could, but I won't. I'm classy.
I don't like naming names, but I don't know what you're talking about right now.
Download our meditation app. It will cure all your problems.
Yeah,
and
no, we fucking detest that kind of shit here. Listen, I try to call myself a very ethical content creator. I don't promise anyone that like what we do here is like gonna fucking cure anyone, because like everyone's mental health journey is like completely fucking unique. Like I can provide all the resources in the world, but maybe none of them are good for you, and that sucks if that's the case. But like at the very least, we provide like a nice supportive community here. The medication ads, the fucking like, oh, this app will cure your whatever,
I just like, I'm also not a big fan of like, you know the stuff. Let me set the scene, slow sort of like piano music, like ham acting of like, are you going through a tough time? Like,
yeah,
you could be the answer to your own problems. Dun dun dun. Score comes in. Everyone's running through meadows in sunlight. It's all beautiful.
God, the fucking medication ads for like antidepressants are just like, so fucking upbeat, sunny. Just like, get Zyprexa today.
I don't look. I'm saying this, and like I'm not trying to like piss on anyone's biscuits or anything, right? But like,
piss on the biscuits.
I think like again, moral entrepreneurism. You need to be like just. Like, so all my degrees are regulated by the BPS, the British Psychological Society. So they're accredited. And like, you can say, like, oh, the BPS, it has its own issues, as does the APA, right? But like,
it does.
But like, because the internet exists, you can just kind of go on the internet and become a mental health professional with like a cereal box certificate, right?
Yeah.
And like, that's dangerous territory, because then you're getting people giving advice which you shouldn't do in places they shouldn't give advice, like say on Twitch. Like that's not good. That's not that ain't gravy. And And it's a bit awkward because they do this kind of whole like slow piano
It's
music.
funny. I had an argument with someone who is like they were like a PhD in psychology, and they were like a clinical psychologist, and they're like, I can give advice on Twitch, and I'm like, not really. Like, I give advice, but I give like, I'm a friend advice. I don't give psychological advice other than just like go see a fucking therapist or go to your doctor. Like,
I can like chat like wax lyrically about like research papers or textbooks or like my
sure,
experience,
but
but
you
I'm never
can't
gonna
tell
say,
fucking
you know
someone you
what,
gotta do this thing
Wabba, you
exactly.
know
Yeah,
what you need.
yeah. What do I need?
I'm gonna write you a
Yeah,
script
write me
for
a
this,
script live on
and
twitch.tv.
and
This
and
seems legal and
and then
ethical.
you'll be sorted.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, mate. And I'll also be sorted if I, hit the subscribe button and all that other thing and just send you fuck tons of money. That's how
Yeah,
it works, right?
exactly. That's how therapy works. So that kind of makes me feel like a level of angst, and like like again when because capitalism, and as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of capitalism. You
Yeah, we
get this
aren't
kind of
either.
like,
We kind of hate that.
well, I know. Let's start up our own mental health foundation, and we'll have a board of people that know nothing about mental health. See, name the institution, and we'll sell our course to other small businesses for profit, and then they can go and deliver the course to other businesses. But no one can be mentally health professional. Like no one can be a trained mental health professional. That'd be fun because businesses are like, okay, we need to like address the growing mental health need because of crushing levels of capitalism and the world is a dumpster fire. I know, let's hire this business in because they've got a certificate that says they can do the mental health shenanigans.
Speaking of mental health shenanigans, legally speaking, you can call yourself a lot of things with just a regular ass like associates, or not associates, but bachelor's degree in psychology. Like, you can legally call yourself like I think there's like certain terms you can't use, but it's like there's a lot that you can use, and they're very deceptive, and it's basically like life coach or like counselor or this, that, and the other thing. And you can
Like
fucking just trick people that it's like, oh yeah, I'm qualified.
like mental health
So
professional
bad.
is not
So
a
bad.
protected title.
No, it's
Like
not.
so it's open to
No, it's not.
misuse.
It is.
Like I
And
mean,
I
there are
really,
people even like
yeah.
in my like field that like don't call themselves a psychologist because it's not a protected title and like anyone could call them it. Whereas like say for example, like I did a master's in health psychology, we were
Right.
told like day one, you cannot call yourself a health psychologist. That is
Nope.
a chartered, protected title.
There you
You
go.
have to apply to a board and get that rubber
Yeah.
stamp. If you do, you will be sued for fraud.
Exactly, which is why I say I have master's mental health counseling, which qualifies me for a mental health counselor, but I'm not licensed. And I make that abundantly fucking clear that I'm not licensed. And I just have to like go through like rigmarole red tape to get licensed, but I don't want to because spoons. But yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like that's the thing. So like you get this kind of double like negative in my view. Like you have all these people, more and more people experiencing and like being willing to like actually talk about stuff, which is a huge improvement and a great achievement. And then you get people that go, "We can make money from this,"
Yeah, right,
and like
literally.
that. Yeah, it does. It doesn't even make me feel good. Like it just doesn't. And I'm not saying like books are better or like like I'm better or whatever. Like you know what I mean. But just like um always just like read into stuff. Like just
I
check regulatory bodies.
I don't think anyone's gonna go out and cancel you for saying, these practices are kind of, just a little bit unethical.
They're a little bit questionable.
Slightly, a lot of it.
Yeah. Do you know like it's that kind of
And
maybe it's because like
predatory too, because it's that predatory thing of just like see, this is why I try to be very, very transparent always, because I'm just waiting for it. I'm literally waiting for the day that someone finds my stream, finds my content, and literally just fucking makes giant ass wide sweeping accusations against me for like using people in the neurodiverse community, and I'm just like, no. Like, we're a support system. I don't know what you fucking want from me. I'm attracting who I attract because that's literally what we're here for, to be a nice big family support system for everyone. Like, I'm not trying to scam anyone. I'm literally being as transparent as possible, but I'm fucking waiting for the day someone does that shit.
that's it. And like maybe I'm at that stage where I'm like I'm tentative with opinions because academics. But like, you know, like even like in the content space, and granted, I'm very, very new, less than 12 months. But like, I'm just big up front and be like, okay, guys, like I'm doing the whole PhD and stuff, but like I'm not your therapist. I'm not qualified to give advice. I wouldn't give advice on Twitch. But also like, this is just a place where you can talk about stuff.
Exactly.
And I will listen. You want to like,
Same.
you know, your job's stressing you out. Put it in chat. Let's chat about it. We'll just have a talk
about
That's
it.
okay.
Exactly.
But yeah, so it's a bit of a mind field,
right?
And like, you know, to dial that back to the grief and loss, like, because people are experiencing stuff, like you get this moral entrepreneurism, and then people aren't getting like the actual assistance that they might need. And like, again, like I meme about it, and I honestly, if you know, please don't take it as a boast. Anyone like listens to it, but like, I'm almost glad that I was able to kind of like untangle like my own sort of wires, because, you know, falling for that type of thing might have, like, that would have put me in like a worse spot, you know. I don't really know exactly where I was going with that, but I just want.
Yeah, you kind of stopped. I was like, shit, did I miss something?
Capitalism is bad.
Capitalism bad. There we go. Done. Point made. Sign it. All right. Let me think of my next question. You were going on about actually having friends in a support system now to help you grieve for your father, and I guess you were just like kind of going through like the years of how everything had been going on, how you've been dealing with it, and we were talking about, you know, how you were saying about how like the regular, you know, like 5 stages of grief is complete bullshit, and just like it's actually like you go through it multiple times and you can skip over it and you can just go left, right, and up. I'm just trying to like refresh your memory of where you were in the story.
Yeah, so I think like, you know, then we sort of, let's talk about like, you know, the other way and sort of coming out of it, and like these sort of transitions. Like, as I say, it was a very like literal, like legal transition, and then, as I mentioned, like with my auntie passing, that was more like an emotional epiphany, I guess. And kind of like really sort of going like, oh, I like need to be in charge of my own destiny, sort of thing, and that really helped me. And I think one of the seminal moments for me was on, like, you know, like a colleague suffered a bereavement, and like it was like the first sort of like significant one they had to like manage themselves. And I remember them sort of turning to me and being like, Chris, like, how do you plan a funeral? And being like, oh yeah, I know this, but like this is an entire role reversal, because, you know, they were older than I was, and someone I greatly respected and looked up to for advice in pretty much any domain of life, right?
Right.
And I just remember being like, oh yeah, this is a thing. I have a skill set for this. And that kind of like paradoxical feeling of like, oh yeah, this is something that I know a lot about, and I'm happy to talk about. And I remember like someone else like described me, was like, yeah, I kind of get the impression that, like, you know, you've seen some shit, you know, you've been through some stuff, you know, and like that, I think people generally take as like reassuring, I guess. And that's why I'm in the mental health field, I guess. Like, you know, so it's like, again, it's that resonance. Like, if you know, and because I'm happy to talk about it so vocally, and like people go, oh, like you've been through this too, and you know, we can share stories, and then, you know, like you're on that same level with someone. I think that's a big deal.
Absolutely. Something I've like come to realize over the past year plus doing this is that by me just sitting here and normalizing these kind of conversations, it helps to normalize it for other people, because I just live so much of my life, you know, in my mental health kind of like thought space of just like, this is normal, we should have these conversations. But, you know, and then it's like very jarring to me when it's like, oh yeah, by the way, real life says no, this is actually not the norm, and I'm a breath of fresh air for people. And I'm like, I am? I'm just talking about mental health. It's not a big deal to me, but it's a huge deal to other people. I'm like, okay, cool.
What is normal for the spider is chaos for the
chaos
fly.
for the fly. Yep.
Yeah.
Good quote.
And like that's it, right? Because, like, you know, you said that yourself, and it's like, yeah, like I've been having these conversations like since way back when, and it's sad, I guess, that like stigmatization is still like to such a degree that we can't have these. I mean, and like
Yeah,
that feeds into what I'm researching, right? Like, let's go full circle. One
exactly.
of the reasons I'm looking at student mental health is because it's still a problem,
Yes.
particularly in the UK. Like, I can only attest that I've read in the UK, right? Um, it's still a problem, and like there is stigmatization about even broaching the subject.
Yeah.
So it's like that's and I'm researching because I have lived experience, and
God,
it's like,
and I'm sure you've probably encountered stigma in the research like field in general because, good lord, going through my master's was a mental jump loop or mental gymnastics of just like control that they wanted over us as master's students, and it was really sickening and kind of triggered me a lot. I got through it eventually, but like, oof, God lord, the amount of just like I don't know how to even fucking describe it, like staunch, like fucking like you gotta listen to us or else, and like we are the end all be all of we have the definitive opinion and there's no other opinions. You have to go with the process and to say anything at all, literally speak a single word was to be like, oh well, you're not giving into the process or whatever. You're not going with it. Fucking hate that shit.
yeah, and like it's, and I think, again, we're talking about like transitions of grief and loss, and it's something
Right.
that, again, the metaphor of the box with the button, it grows bigger, but the button still gets hit occasionally, right? I'll still have
Right.
moments, in the same way that, like, I'm a big believer in that. I'm not a big fan of the medical model. Like, just let's just get out there. Period. It's like, I've experienced ill mental health. I had two sort of significant bouts of like depression, and things like this. But it's like it's not just gone, right? Like, it can still hit you. And I actually had like an episode like this year, like, but I think it was compounding of everything else. But like, I remember it was a case of like, there was lockdown in the UK. I was reading all these statistics for like my literature review to try and like back up why I was doing this research about just how dire things were, and I was just like, "This is awful. This is so bad." And like, it really got to me. And like, I had like a wee episode, and I was like way not in a good place. And through, I think, the good graces of having like my own sort of like coping mechanism and stuff, it was like a 4 or 5 days, bit of a stupor. And I was able to sort of, pick myself back up again.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like that severe, but it was just like I was definitely like not in a great place for a little bit. And that's okay, right? Like, let normalize that mental health is cyclical, right?
Right.
Like, normalize that you need mental health days, and that, like, you
Yeah,
can go, yeah, do you know
absolutely.
what? My body could be in work today, but the mind is not. So I'm gonna take a day's rest, because if I take a day now, that will save me having to take 10 later.
Exactly. Listen, I love the quote, make time for wellness or be forced to take time for illness.
Yeah. And so, we just don't view it. We see it so disconnectedly, and it's a big movement that I'm part of in trying to say, like, well, I mean, you can date, I think therefore I am, our boy Rene Descartes, that sort of actually made people consider that the mind and body were linked, and yet here we are, how many hundreds of years later, and people still kind of view mental health and physical health differently. Like, why do we not just look at health? And maybe maybe you're going through some ill mental health, maybe you've got a cold, maybe you're just ill, but like, it's all just health, right? And it's like, if you're ill, you're ill. If you're ill, don't come into work, because it's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for anyone else either. Like, and that's like, that's more like physical illness, because you can't just catch depression by sitting next to me on the bus. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just gonna be better for everyone if you get the rest that you need to get where you need to be.
Understand. Sorry, I'm reading chat, catching up.
No, it's all right. Yeah, I feel like I've gone like on so many like little loop de loops. I don't know if have you got any other questions? I'm also conscious of time. I don't want to run you for days.
Well, I'm conscious of your time. Let me think. Um, how are you? Hi, Nero. Oh my God. Okay. Well, we have a Nero now. Um, think of questions, Waba. How are you dealing with this currently? Do you have like a therapist to talk to? I think you already mentioned no, but like how has this impacted your life currently, basically?
I think it's the thing I manage. It's the thing I experience and sort of like, as I say, kind of like work through. I'm not like currently in therapy. I'm not currently like taking any medications or anything. And I kind of said that's a bit weird. Like, yeah, by the same token, I,
Right.
I definitely benefit from like being in therapy, but like, um,
Right.
you know, I, again, like resources and time and like I know it's something that like maybe we say too much, but I feel like I am in such a good state, like just coping with myself, that I know there are people that definitely need it more than I do, and I'm not being like all high and mighty, being like there is a greater need elsewhere, right? It's just legitimately
Sure.
like I have been forced to self-soothe, shall we say, and like
Mm-hmm.
self-manage for so long that I almost like I think adapting to something else would probably be more problematic. Like I just know how to manage myself. I know through lots of like introspection and legitimate like studying psychology, like that I just seem to know what I'm doing. And don't get me wrong, like I hear it's great to hear of other psychologists that like no, like I have a therapist because that helps me do therapy. I think if I ever go into like psychotherapy as an area, which is something I would like to do in the future
Absolutely.
alongside research, then you need like supervision. Like you need a therapist to deal with giving therapy. But
Yes.
like right now, academia is a field I'm comfortable with. I'm doing well. I hope, and I'm just doing it, and I'm okay, and I'm managing, and I'm doing the business. So like,
Hmm.
does it impact me? Like, yeah, of course. I think because you at the end of the day, you
Right.
cannot replace the people that leave your life, right?
No.
That's what grief is. I really, maybe you'll disagree, but I really
Mm.
hate the same. Grief is just the love that we used to feel. Because I hate to break, but like you can experience grief with people
What?
that have done you wrong.
I don't understand. I don't understand that. Grief
Have you so
is
have
the
you not heard
no, no,
this?
no, no. I haven't heard the saying, so I'm trying to process it right now. Grief is just the love lost, or what was, say it again? Sorry.
I think I forget like the exact phrasing, but it's like it's akin to like grief is just all the love that you didn't get to express or something like that. Like you're in
I
such
don't
pain
think that's
because
true.
you didn't get the chance to tell people that you love them in real life.
I feel like that's very disparaging to folks who have lived a long life. You can still grieve someone even though you love them every single way that you could imagine.
And also like you can experience
It's silly.
like grief for people that have done you wrong, and like
Right.
that's not
Exactly.
love. Like that's just grief, right?
Grief is grief,
Like
right?
yeah, it's its own separate thing, and I think that makes it is partly why I think people have a hard time processing it, right? Because it exists like in its own paradigm, and as I'm sure you can appreciate, when something is new or requires, I don't know, any degree of cognitive effort to process, people get lazy, can't be bothered.
Right.
We're just ping it in this other category. So grief, that's basically love. It's fine. Like,
Not really, but okay.
but yeah, but okay. So it's like, of course, like again, like the ball analogy is great. Like the ball in the box, and if you say it's like a cannonball, I think that also helps because that adds like that feeling of weight. And like sometimes you feel it, sometimes you don't. I think like for me, I sit here and I go, I'm on a mission. I'm doing a thing. I'm trying to do the business. Um, and I do that because that's the mission I'm on. Like I do feel like again, I don't describe myself as religious. I'd say maybe slightly more spiritual, but also I
Right.
feel the benefit of the people that have passed. And I try and like say, okay, well they're in here, and I always think of it as like when people leave, like that doesn't automatically delete like all the memories and experiences and
No,
thoughts that you
of
had
course it
of them.
doesn't.
Good and the bad. My dad he was not a saint. You know what I mean?
Right. Can I?
He
Hmm.
gone.
Sorry. I was gonna say, could I tell you how I see grief and loss in a bit of ways of like how to process it? This is just me,
Hmm.
right? This is no one else. This is just me. But I kind of see it in a way of just, how can I best honor the memory of someone? I think it's okay, to think about someone, and think about, all the good times, all the bad times, and kind of just like, if you feel like you're missing something or like you missed out on something, is there a way to carry on, their legacy of sorts, if that makes any sense? Because sometimes people get, hung up about something, I know for my grandmother, she used to write a lot of poetry, and she had like letters from the president and stuff, and it was a very cool thing. Now, I wasn't too connected with my grandmother, so I didn't really give two hoots, unfortunately. But if I was my dad, who lost his mother, basically, I would maybe want to consider, framing some of her poetry, or just like kind of like publishing it and stuff, and I don't know, just different ways to grieve, I suppose.
I think you touch on something there, and it's entirely individual, right? I
Yeah,
think so. I
absolutely.
also just saw a point in chat. I want to quickly say, like, I think a person can like have no feelings or not even care about someone and still feel
Right.
grief. I mean, research has shown, so this is like a little bit of academia for you. Research has shown that you can feel grief entirely parasocially.
Yep.
So what that means is that you can feel grief for, like, say, for example, fictional characters.
Yes.
Like
Oh,
you can
yes.
physically feel and experience the
Yes.
grief, not to the same level, but to a level for fictional characters. You know that
Hmm.
feeling you finish like an epic game and you're like,
Right.
I don't know what to do. There's
Oh,
now a
man.
hole in my life.
Right.
That's a little, it's a little like a little snack bite.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's
That's
such a good
that's.
validation. It's like something a lot of us already knew, but I feel like sometimes, just as like nerds and geeks and whatnot, and like, we like our video games, we like our stories, we like our cartoons, whatever, we like our anime, people kind of sometimes look at us in a silly way because it's like, why are you crying over this character? It's just a character in a story. And it's like, but I made a connection with this character. Like, I saw someone in this character, even if I just connected with only the purely character and no one else in my real life, I can still go through emotions of that. And I think people need to understand that media can bring about those emotions, both good and bad.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's like, so I have nothing against like entertainment, right? But there's a
Right.
difference between entertainment and art, and like,
Right.
regardless of what the form of media is, like the medium, like if you feel something, then that's pretty successful, right? Like, no one would say, "Well, Chris, it's a bit weird. You're feeling emotions from listening to that really emotional album."
Because it was
Um,
emotional. What the
yeah, right.
fuck? Like,
Like
hello?
you're like able to understand that, whereas like if it's something that's slightly more, well, slightly less sort of commonly accepted, I guess. But like, I mean, another good one is like people feel real grief when celebrities die. I remember I was like legitimately very upset when
Yeah.
BB King died. The
Right.
legendary blues guitarist. I'd never
Hmm.
met BB King. He didn't know me.
Right. But you still felt
I'm
the grief.
Yeah, but I remember reading that in the news and just genuinely feeling so sad. So sad. And I think, like, there's that, it's empathy, right? Like, you see the news, and like it's really easy to, like, you kind of to a way have to shut it off a little bit because the news is upsetting, right? But like it's perfectly natural to, like, to hear a
Kobe
news story and
Bryant.
go like, that is really sad, and that has like, that's that's pissed on my strawberries for the day a little bit,
You know
because that's
what?
natural. Like, that's
Yeah,
natural.
absolutely it is. Yeah, Kobe Bryant was another one. People grieved.
Oh yeah, like I don't even follow baseball, but like just the news coverage of that got me like real sad.
Basketball.
Sorry, yeah, basketball. See, I'm tired. That's
That's
genuine
okay.
slip on my part. I got the
Uh,
B in the ball right.
yeah,
Like,
you got. I always say sports ball.
sports
You
ball.
know
Yeah.
what's an interesting grieving thing that I have had that I've experienced before? So I identify myself as not very religious, but very more spiritual. If anything, I was identifying with like the Jewish faith. And I had an experience where I went to a good lord, I'm gonna forget the name of it, but someone in my chat's gonna know it. It's basically the remembrance service, but the Hebrew name for the remembrance of the Holocaust. Um, and I just literally fucking had a mental breakdown. I was just crying for hours, and my parents literally had to drag me out of there. Because I just like felt so connected to the people. Like, I didn't know these people, but like I was being told that like this was like these are this is our like kin, basically. They're brothers and sisters, Jewish Jews in captivity. who got killed in the gas chambers, and I fucking sobbed for them. I didn't know them, but I still sobbed for them. It was wild.
Oh yeah, I like again like I don't want to use like specifically, but I visited like
All right.
Poland,
Yeah, go for it.
like
Yeah.
and like
I
I
couldn't do it.
visited the camps,
Yeah.
and like oh god,
You
that
can
was a
feel it,
sad time.
right? You can
That was
fucking
a sad
feel it.
time.
Yeah.
Like and if you go there and like don't feel any emotion, like that's a little bit yikes, because like you
Right.
shouldn't be able to look at that and go, this level of human atrocity is like completely fine. Like you shouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
Like it was so disquieting, just in every way. Like I was with a couple of
Yeah.
friends and like we were having this great little time. We're like, okay, we'll go. We're interested in history. I think it's important to
Sure.
accept. I mean, I'm saying this as a British person. We should accept our evil and dark history so that we don't make those mistakes again. And some people like to pretend that we aren't the bad guys. Explain that one. But like like
Yeah.
accepting that and experiencing that, like it changed my perspective on things, like for the better, right? And like I think that's important. I think not like more people should like go there specifically, but like
Right.
paying that respect and that homage to things and saying actually yeah, like I understand my role as like a human in like these circumstances, like can be really beneficial. I don't know
Absolutely.
if that makes sense. Uh, but like you're just like
Yeah, it does.
accepting like the experiences of like the broader, society and community. It's that whole thing of like really simply put, like acting for more than just yourself.
I mean, it is. Yeah, I was about to say it's like a community societal responsibility to be aware of our history and to make sure as a community we don't repeat it / we don't allow things to get to a point where it becomes a potential repeatable. People were very fucking scared during the Trump era because they saw a lot of similarities between him and like they compared him to Hitler, which I feel like is like a fucking meme comparison at this point. But there was some shit that was like legitimately really fucking concerning. It was like, what the fuck, you guys? What are we doing? Hello. And somehow 30% of America, which accounted for more than 50% of the vote, said, yeah. It got really fucking scary, and the effects are still being felt today. Like, I know there's been irreparable damage, I can't pronounce that word, to, the LGBT community, but especially the trans community, in regards to just workplace protections and stuff like that. It's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's a big old cluster of bad times. Uh, but like yeah, it's yeah. So like and even then, I think to try and make a very wide loop back to what I was originally saying, in just like in just trying to engage that like little bit of empathy, right? I think all at the end of the day, anyone is the opportunity to be heard, right? And I think particularly
Yes.
when you're undergoing like grief or a period of grief where you're really feeling that, like just a little bit of empathy, even just like listening, like even if you don't
Yeah.
understand, right? And I think this was the big problem with like
But
my
you don't
fellow
have to
kids.
understand.
Like you didn't have to understand, you didn't have to like give me an answer, you didn't have to like be my therapist or whatever. Like they could have just been there, just give us a wee hug, put their arm around me, and that would have been like enough, you know.
Right.
So yeah.
Damn. So let me ask you this. This is kind of like I'm just trying to be mindful. I think you said you only had until like 15 minutes now. Yeah.
Um,
I don't know.
yeah, like no, another 15 at max.
That's
That's
what I
all right.
thought. Okay. So this is usually my last question. So we'll just go with it. What would you say to other people who are going through a kind of grieving process themselves? Like, do you have any words, any advice that might help someone who's going through this?
Apologies if I sound like a broken record, but I think just like what you're feeling is fine.
Yeah.
Like there is no written path or script to how you should be feeling and what you should be experiencing. I think always like be safe. Like don't be engaged in those risk taking behaviors. That's not ideal. With that, try not to do that where possible, but just like accept like where you are, feel what you want to feel. I think because a lot of the time, like I don't want to get more like meta philosophical, right? But like, I made mistakes. I did things that was stupid, and like the waves of grief, and because of experiencing ill mental health, right? Um, but like I always say, oh, is there anything you'd change? That kind of question. Like, what would you tell yourself if you could go back and tell yourself 3 years ago, right? Like that kind of stuff. I always say nothing because everything that happened to me, like whether that was my fault or not, right? Like got me to where I am now, and that's a byproduct of all the knowledge and experiences that like I have, and and this might rock some people's worlds, but I'm pretty happy with where I am right now. So I think what you're feeling is valid, right? It doesn't matter like what it is that you're grieving, right? But like that's fine. As I say, it's not about comparison. It's not about saying, well, Chrissy Day is talking about his dead dad. That's worse than my insert. It's not. It's the same. It's what if that's what you're experiencing, that's what you're experiencing. I think the last thing I want to say, in regards to this, and it's a really really important one, but if you're listening to this and you've experienced stuff, and I see like a line of sort of consequence in experiencing what I have, but like it took me, I think, the longest time to realize that the trauma that I was experiencing was not my fault, and that's
Oh god, that's a good therapy line of like, hey, it's not your fault, and like you really got to bake that into yourself.
I mean, it's not quite. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's not about being like, well, I'm blameless. Okay, like let's not go the other way, or within these
Right.
parameters, right? But like, there was a part of me because of what my dad was going through in his substance. I always think like, well, could I have done something? What if I hadn't have moved out? Type of thing. I was plagued with these questions for a long time. Even if I was like going really like into my own head, did part of me want to be a psychologist to help people like my own father? Honestly,
Maybe.
yeah,
Maybe.
100%.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't have to be a psychologist to work that out.
Yeah.
Of course, because I saw someone who had experienced trauma and was suffering because of it. I don't like the word suffering. Sorry, I am tired. But he was not having a good time, and he never got the support that he needed for various reasons, right? So obviously, it's quite natural to say, yeah, I want to try and help people with this too. But the trauma that you experience is not your fault. Like at the end of the day, the things that have happened to you are because of someone else, and that other person had every single second up towards that point to not do that. They chose to make the choices that they did, right? Like, so
Right.
someone chose to like end my father's life for money. That was a
Right.
choice they made. Like, that's not my fault.
Yeah.
I can't be held responsible for that. When at the time, I was a boy. Like, what like being like really rational. Like, what could I have physically done?
Right.
Absolutely
Exactly.
nothing. And accepting that and letting that go is really difficult. I still sometimes get angry, like just about it, like, and I think that's perfectly natural, but like that's not your fault, and it's really not. And don't hold yourself to account for things that you're not responsible for. Hold yourself to account for things you are responsible for.
Right.
Like it's that whole thing of like you can't stop anyone saying X, Y, or Z to you, but you can choose how to respond to it. You know,
Absolutely.
like that's where like you can internalize and can control and then control your response. I think that was like one of the biggest things I had to learn, and actually saying like his death was not my fault.
Yeah. That reminds me of two different quotes now, that I have on here. I'm on my quotes things, but one of which is mental health is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. I'm very okay. Hi, Nero. I'm very big on personal responsibility in here, and just owning your own shit, say so to speak, and self care and all that other good stuff. But part of that is taking care of yourself and finding what help do you need to get yourself in a better position mentally. It's what we're all about, is literally like, hey, it's not your fault that you are the way you are, but it is unfortunately not your responsibility to kind of take care of it, and ultimately you have a responsibility to yourself. You owe it to yourself to get better in a way.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I don't like being so cliche, but you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Like
Right.
unless you're ready,
We've had those discussions as well here too. Of
unless
just
like you're
like I can
ready
give
to
you all the
begin that.
resources in the world, but yeah,
But like unless you're ready to go on that journey, though, then like
exactly.
you're not gonna get the most from it, right? And I
Right.
think like that's something I experienced. Like I went through it a little bit, and I was like, I hadn't really processed enough at that point, so it maybe wasn't as effective. Um, and if I was gonna counter that a little bit, I would say the sort of societal model, a much more social model than medical model, and think like society has if society was structured better, it wouldn't need you to get to like a more severe point
Like a
before
breaking
it
point.
considered giving you like
Right.
support. So it
Right.
shouldn't be like a okay, well now you should maybe think about like looking for support. Like it should just be embedded into the culture. Like the
Right.
example I like to give is in the UK over the past like 12 months, there's been a lot of discussions around women
Mm-hmm.
and like so if you're going like a medical model route, you would say, okay, I don't know if anyone listening knows many people that identify as women, but like a lot of the time in my experience, like they don't
Say
like say
so.
going out alone at night, for
Yep.
example. So on
Absolutely.
a medical model, they would go, well, all of like these people that identify as female just have anxiety. Here we go, we'll give you something for that.
Oh my god.
The reverse of this is, oh, maybe there's something the society is doing wrong,
Yeah, maybe just a little bit.
causing all this. Like I don't know, like patriarchal misogyny.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just a lot of it.
Maybe, you know what I mean? And like I always say,
Right.
like if society was better structured, and I'm being, I'm asking a lot from society that can't get the basics right.
Yeah.
But like like if we all had a better view of mental health, then it wouldn't be a case like, well, things have got to get this bad before
Exactly. Right.
you need support. If it was just embedded and we could have these type of conversations, this was normal. Everyone would be like, oh, actually, do you know what? I'm not
Yeah.
having a great time at the moment. I need to go and see my therapist, and that be
Hundred
normal and
fucking
fine.
percent. Make a therapist like a normal, functional thing in society. I think teaching mindfulness at a super early age is really helpful because it's a coping mechanism. I've seen kindergartens now teach kids like mindfulness and like coping skills and stuff, and I think that's such an amazing transformative potential thing. Like you're now raising a generation that is a lot more emotionally in tune with themselves, and as a result will be emotionally in tune with each other. This is like one of my giant rants about being emotionally in tune, being emotionally EQ over IQ kind of thing.
Yeah,
Of just be empathetic towards other people's plights, and I think that will make the world a better place. But we can start with our self-care because we have to own our own shit, right? So
yeah.
take care more of yourself. You take care of others.
I don't like the term like personally, and I don't want to project onto anyone else, but it's kind of the terminology used in the academic sort of
Which
realm, right?
term?
But it's like victim blaming, right? And like you get that in mental health. Like you're a
Yeah,
person
absolutely.
experiencing like this period of ill mental health, and everyone kind of goes, "Well, that's on you, bud. That's
Oh
it's
yeah,
your
no,
fault."
I don't
You
mean
know
it
what I
that way at
mean?
all.
Oh no, I'm not. Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
not saying that's what you meant, but like that's what happens, right?
that is what happens though. Yeah, you're
And
right.
like it's exactly the same. Like in the other example that I just gave, like it's always like, oh well, the person that has experienced the rough stuff, like oh well, this is what you should have done to not get to that point. It's like no, how about like just have a
Right.
better functioning society?
Yeah,
Like,
seriously. No, I big agree, and that's why I try to like tell people like, hey, normalize this conversation in everyday life because it'll help. It'll help
yeah,
people
big belief.
like it'll help change.
Yeah, reduce stigmatization and then make
Right.
these type of like even this conversation I think is so far from like even being normalized that
Right.
you know it's going to be like a challenging like listen for
Which
people.
again,
I mean,
ironic considering let's loop around to our beginning. Your first sentence really, which is everyone's gonna die.
yeah,
It's a fact of life. With life comes death, and the less we talk about it, the more taboo becomes, and the more people will suffer as a result. Honestly, because if you look in any other society where they embrace death, and they kind of really talk about it a lot, people do so much better because it's like they have a support system, they have a means, they have death ceremonies. I mean, the one that I immediately am thinking of is like Dia de Muertes, you know, just in Mexican culture, right? I hope Mexican, yeah. But yeah, I hope I'm right about that, saying that. But yeah, just that in entirely their society, you know, they know death well. It's not like a non-known thing, and as a result, people probably do a lot better when it comes to grief.
And like, I kind of again memed about it because I think having like a dark sense of humor helps breach the stigmatization a little bit and have these conversations a little bit more easier. Like, and that's not true for everything. I don't think you should make jokes about everything. That, you know what I mean? Like, but it certainly helps with this. I think it's part of the territory in psychology, right? Like, you're dealing with like all like the worst of humanity. You've got to laugh, otherwise you just cry. But like, during the first ad break, you were like, okay, what's the meaning of life? And I was like, the fact that it ends. Going like full like
Right.
philosophy on you. Like, the reason that I think life has any meaning at all is that the fact that it ends. Because if it didn't end, it'd be really boring. Because it really would just be the boulder up and down all the time with like a slight change in scenery, right? But like the fact that it ends makes it great because it's like that gives meaning and super special, mega awesome chocolate coated fudginess to everything that we do. And like, it's not just being like, oh, look at my Rolodex of things that I've done because they look super mega fun, awesome, fudge coated chocolate deliciousness. But it's about just being able to say, yeah, you know what, like, so I'll quote one of my favorite bands, Fall Out Boy, but like, I testify that if I die in my sleep, then I know my life is just a killer dream. And it's like, if I can go to bed going, you know what, like, I've done my best for that day, whatever that is, trying to pursue the goals that I'm on. If that's the end of my innings, that's the end of my innings.
All right. Thank you for talking with us again. Like, yeah, mic drop, pretty much. I love it, dude. This is awesome. This is really fucking just mind blowing.
Sorry, another good quote, but it's from the legendary
Yeah.
John Mahoney, one of our own from Blackpool, believe it or not, from the TV show Frasier, and he talks about stuff, and he's like, it's not the times that went wrong, where you look like an ass, that you regret the most. It's the times that you weren't willing to like try that you regret the most. Yeah. And I always couple that with a line from Doug Stanhope in that it's only funny if you do it. So like, and again, like, never trying to hurt anyone else or always being considerate of others and not, looking after yourself. But like, that's the kind of mantra I kind of live with. Like, be bold. Like, if I do something and it's stupid, at least it'll be funny. I can get a story out of it, right? And like, at least I can say, well, I tried. So I will just put myself in opportunities. I probably could do with learning how to say no, because then you get like a real packed schedule. Right. But like, just do stuff. Like, it's just like this. Like, a few years back, I'd never have done this. Like, you know what I mean? I wouldn't. I just felt, no, it's not for me. I'm not the type of personality anyone will be bothered to listen to me chat mints for X amount of time, right?
I very much enjoyed listening to you.
Like, screw it. I want to have this on my CV and go, yeah, I did this podcast. I'll talk about grief and loss because that's the thing I know about and think people should know more about.
I love it.
Why not?
Yeah, this was magic. This is great. Thank you so much for being on here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for just everything. You're excellent, man.
No worries. Like, I know you've been sharing the link, but like, check me out on like Twitter is probably the best place at Chris L Psych. That's because I tweet more than anything, and on there is the link to everything else, like the blog.
If you want to just link it in chat, that's fine.
I will if I have it open. I don't. I will get it open, and I'll drop a link in there now. But yeah, like, if you're interested, like, that's gotta rep myself, right?
Absolutely.
But otherwise, like, yeah, I'm just a geeky boy trying to do some psychological science, do it well. If you're currently studying for a degree, like, check my pinned tweet. Need participants, please and thank you.
Yes, do the thing. All right,
do the thing.
Take care. Have a good night.
All right.
I'll talk to you later.
Peace, Waba fam, and enjoy the rest of your stream. So take it easy.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Stream-wise, stick around. YouTube-wise, this is the end of Mental Health Monday. I'm going to play the ender now. All right? No one panic. No one panic. I will go to the just chatting screen afterwards. This is literally just so I can highlight it nicely. And hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching Mental Health Monday. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to give the video a like, put a comment down below, and share it with a friend. If you want to catch it live, feel free to follow us on Twitch. The link is in the description below. As always, mental health is an open and ongoing discussion, so feel free to say hello and then, come talk with us about mental health. I love the topic, always talk about it. It's a chill atmosphere, it's a safe space. Sometimes we get a little chaos and chaotic, but it's still a safe space all the same. If you also enjoyed the guests and what they had to say, you can check out their content as well. I put their Twitch links in the description below. As for the rest of my socials, they're also down there: Twitter, Instagram, and the Discord if you want to join. As always, take care of yourself, do some self-care today, and be well. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.